So what I will say about John is somebody that we've known for a long time at the IFST. I think you were instrumental in setting food systems research activity at the University of Oxford about, 12 years ago, something like that. And he's certainly been really instrumental in developing this whole idea of food systems thinking, which we're all starting to shift towards now. So I'd just like to welcome you, John.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome indeed to Oxford, to the Environmental Change Institute. Our research group, the niche we like to aim to fill is that we only ever think about the whole system. Many specialisms, of course, embodied in food systems, but we try and take the helicopter view and look across the interactions between those distinct elements and the ultimate outcomes that we get from the food sector. So, this is a conference about adaptation. I'm just always asked the question, well, who actually has to adapt what? It's all very well to say we need to transform the food system, but we need a bit more specificity. So I think it's probably worth starting with asking the question, what outcomes do we really want from the food system? Obviously, food security, these three major components you're familiar with. Stability is another one that begs the question, stability of what? The notion of sustainability and agency are very much part of the discourse now. But let's not forget that our food system delivers to society a lot more than food. Think of all the other things that we get. Here's a list that, in my mind, you could add your own. You may want to change the order. But obviously, employment for all the people involved is very important. There are many diagrams like this. This is a very simple one, been around for some years now. But it makes the point that there is a series of activities, important word, and the key here is that all these words end with the letters I and G. By coincidence, the first three letters of my name, but that's not the point. It's a reminder that these are doing words, they're things we do, so hold it in your mind. In so doing, as you well know, the material is transformed from the buying list that comes off the farm into something you and I want to eat, called food. And that's very much the realm in which many of you, of course, are working. We can change quality, we can add material, we can take off material, we can change it altogether. But the other thing, of course, is value addition. And the value of the wheat and the loaf of bread, 10, 12% compared to what we're actually paying in the shop. So all of those activities add value because they're all really good strategies for the people involved in the process. Let's see if a little graph in a report that my colleague Saha Hasnain did a couple of years ago, which was commissioned by UK Army to actually analyse the food system in the UK to try and quantify it. This is just the number of people employed, and the size of the circles suggests the number of people who have a livelihood in it. Processing, manufacturing, you see in orange. But one of the biggest bubbles, of course, is catering and hospitality. The people who work here, for instance, in the catering would be included in that. The other one was the economic value of it. And this was very interesting because here we see the processing and the manufacturing is pretty much equal with retailing and catering. And I do think it's a very important point to remember, and well, as you will know, food manufacturing is the biggest manufacturing sector in the UK by a long way in terms of economics. So just some simple data as how important the processing and manufacturing realm is in the entire delivery of the food that I need. So our food system activities give rise to a set of social and economic outcomes. So the second key word is the outcomes. We've got the social and economic outcomes, and we've got the food security. That's all very straightforward. But let's not forget that the food sector in its entirety, but particularly the primary production, has a massive impact on our natural resource base upon which our food system absolutely depends. So fresh water, goodness me, this season this summer is notable. Here's somebody with his rain gun for the tatties, and that's going to be a big issue in the weeks ahead. The biodiversity impact is measurable. It's really quite significant, and the neonics and all that sort of stuff are in the press at the moment. But of course, in the marine environment, we're also aware that 2/3 of our key populations are really overfished already around our shores. And here we have the big debate with policy agenda in Europe or us. So other things to not forget: pollution, litter, plastics, chemicals in the bioenvironment, all sorts of illness. But they are a byproduct of our efforts to achieve our food security and establish fair and just livelihoods. And then finally, last but not least, we know that the food sector contributes about the third of anthropogenic greenhouse gases. So then we have a situation to do with the environment. But there's another area to think about, which is the link between animals and human health. This is the graph of the interaction between human populations in green, wildlife in blue, and managed livestock in yellow. The writing's a little bit small, but for those at the back of the room, just take it. You don't want any of those things. They're to be avoided at all costs, but they are then. And it depends on how you view the origins of COVID. It's there as well. Mpox has been a big issue. And most recently, we've got the new spectre of avian bird flu, which has actually crossed over to human populations in Cambodia. And who knows where that's going to go. So there is an issue. But there's another issue, which is the relationship between our management of livestock with antimicrobial resistant products to, enhance productivity, and the antimicrobial resistance that is emerging now, and the superbugs that we're aware of in our health sector. So quite a lot of interaction was there. But the last thing I want to leave us with in this area of the talk is the ethical issues. And it's really important as we're discussing food system activities and how we can adapt those activities to deliver more balanced outcomes, that we don't forget that we need to have a fair and a just system. And again, you can add your own words. You may disagree with some of mine. You may want to rearrange the order. But they're all there. And we must not forget that there is an ethical and a justice dimension to our food sector. So, multiple outcomes, not just social and economic, but also environmental. And the game in town is balancing. What we're trying to do is achieve what we want, which is milk and honey, and balance it with what we do, which is the activities, and hence the what we get. And the language should not be more simple. What we do leads to what we get. And if we want to get different, we need to do different. We need to adapt our activities, and that's the key message. So, trade-offs abound across there. There's all sorts of negotiations needed, but there is the opportunity for synergy. And I think part of the analysis that we try to undertake in our research group from the helicopter looks across that entire diagram to try and see where the synergies can be found, what needs to be done, who needs to adapt what in order to achieve those synergies. So, many diagrams, again, and this is the sort of thing we'll see, which link the drivers, the top left circle, into the activities. The drivers affect the behavior of us, the actors. What are the outcomes of that? And round we go. That's, again, in the same form. But the purpose of this diagram is not just to say that's what's happening, it's to actually link it to policy goals. And so one has to be aware of the policy landscape, how that is shifting, what people are really aiming for, whether it's the formal monocentric governance of government, or whether it's the emerging governance through NGO and third sector, and how they interact. That's what's really going on. And so if one's interested in more vibrant enterprise or healthier diets, one has to understand that dynamic. When do we intervene? How do we adapt? And who has to do what? So there are a number of other ways of communicating the complexity of the system to the general public. That diagram is a science diagram developed to discuss with policy people. This is a cartoon which just alerts people to what's going on. You may think it's a little bit alarmist, but nonetheless, that's the sort of stuff that's out there. But there's another way of communicating to the public what the food system is. And this is the back of a milk company from Uzbekistan, as it happens. But it's the first thing that ever seen anywhere on a product, the food value chain. It's a little bit small, but if you just look on, it starts with the cow and milk. It goes all the way through the processing, the logistics, the retail, all the way down to the table. And I just thought that was a marvelous opportunity to explain to anybody sitting at the breakfast table literally where the milk comes from and how it gets there. So there were various communication methods available. So where are we today? Here in the UK, there's about 70 million of us. We know that there's 4 to 8 million people who are hungry at any one stage in the day. Insufficient calories, certainly insufficient nutrients. We know it's getting on with a fourth of our population is suboptimal from a nutrition point of view. Vitamin D, that is an example. They're not necessarily hungry. We also know that there's getting on for a third of us with excess calorie for an energy need. Many of them are also nutrition suboptimal. It's not just calorie. And what that means is that the less than half the UK population has actually got the healthy dominant as defined. And this notion of the triple burden of malnutrition, the 3 circles of malnutrition, is the new norm. And it's costing a lot of money. It's costing, the obesity is costing the NHS about $6 billion a year alone. And that's expected to rise because of the increased incidence of type 2 diabetes principally. There's a wide economic toll estimated at 3-4% of UK GDP. These are big numbers. And our National Health Service, that you all know, is almost on its knees already. So the prospect of yet further disease coming down the track, I think, is very worrying indeed. It's recognised as a growing challenge. This came out just a week or two ago. Big report from Royal Society of Public Health. Deeply concerning projections showing child obesity rates are set to worsen up to 90% of the country. This is a remarkable statistic. And it's something that we really need to arrest and catch head on. So it begs the question, what determines which of these circles any of us fall in? Broadly speaking, we are the consumers at the top, and it's the constraints and the drivers of our diet choice. So we see here a list of words in italics: affordability, preference, cooking skill, cultural norms. All of those things come together to determine what I eat for dinner. Affordability is a principal one for most people, and that's very largely set by this series of activities. You see, these are all the ING words appearing again, and the uplift, the value of the wheat to the loaf of bread is what's going on here. So affordability is very important, and this set of activities basically set the final quality and price of the shop. And those people are dependent on the principal and the primary producers, the agriculturalists, the fisheries, the farmers in Mother, who set the basic quality and price of them get. And those people are dependent on the natural resource base, which is currently being depleted. So, very simple, nice and linear diagram. Oh, that it was. The feedbacks, the messaging, the money, the influence, the power dynamics across that piece are enormous. And this is really the navigation that we're trying to understand and help with our research. And of course, the drivers of these relationships, whether it's feed forward or feed back, are very much related to the context in which the system is operating, the political context and the like. And then finally, of course, we have this notion of the food environment. A lot of people talk about we need to talk to the farmers. I don't think so. What we need to talk about is the top of the diagram. That's the food environment, which is influencing my behaviour. And as we think about how we get people out of the red circles into the green circle, we need to think about the messaging. How do we prepare the messaging? So, a little bit of data. This is from Jeff Hanso's work. Just actually mapped the sales of ultra-processed food across parts of the world, ranging from 2006 up to last year. And you'll see there in Western Europe, it's pretty high, not quite as high as Australians in North America, but in all parts of the world it's going up. What's interesting is that the biggest rise is this area in pale green, which is the growth in ready meals. And this is where there's a lot of processed food, there's a lot of sugar, there's a lot of fat, there's a lot of convenience. And also, it's often very affordable. So that's something we need to get a handle on. Elsewhere, it's also going up. Central Asia, the actual graph is steeper. There is more introduction of ready meals in that part of the world. So these are parts of the world on the right of the diagram which are least prepared to handle a health crisis related to diet. So, 53% of total in the UK now, the latest data from a few years ago. It really is massive. This brings me to the FAO definition, which you're probably familiar with. That, it's bundle of words in there. You can think it was designed by a committee. Well, it was designed by a huge conference. Everyone wanted their word in it. But one of the most important words is sufficient. And it's one of those words that your eye kind of whizzes over as you're looking at the other key words. But sufficient is now the most important word, in my opinion, because what sufficient means is enough for a given purpose. It means enough if you haven't got enough, and it means not too much if you're getting too much. So focus on that notion. How do we manage our food sector to have people have sufficient and thereby more healthy diets? And this piece from the Lancet, Global Syndemic, absolutely true. It came out a few years ago, but it was really making the point that it's not just diet and health, but it's diet and climate, and it's under and over nutrition and whole shebang coming together. And it was called the Syndemic, which was captured very well in this Lancet special issue. The biggest challenge we have, but I think it is the biggest challenge, isn't it? There's been a lot of talk about the need for sustainable diets. I don't buy that phrase. I know my good friend and colleague Tim Lang wrote a big fat book called Sustainable Diets. I said, Tim, the book is fantastic. It's got the one title. What we really need is a healthy diet from a sustainable food system. And we need to tease apart the notion of sustainable diets into healthy diets and sustainable food systems. The healthy diet is what we're aiming for, get everybody out of the red circle into the green circle, and the healthy diet outcomes have a list of attributes, and of course one of them is sufficient. I've just put that in red. But say for the sustainable food system, these refer to the activities, these refer to the what we do. And so here we're looking for environmental sound, yes. Most people recognise that part of the sustainable means environment, but of course sustainable refers to business as well. The business has got to be economically sustainable. It's got to be socially acceptable. So the way we manage our activities is very important. We have this call for food system transformation. We're aware of that. We need a radical transformation of the system. What actually does that mean? In my mind, it asks the question, what are we actually trying to transform? Transform the system doesn't cut it. What we are trying to transform, in my opinion, are the food system outcomes, the things we get. We want a better balance across health, enterprise, livelihoods, animal welfare, the list we had at the beginning. So basically, we're trying to transform the outcomes from state A to state B in a more balanced way. Again, very simple language. Here are some examples. Poor diet, poor environmental outcomes to better outcomes. It's the outcomes we're trying to transform. How do we do that? Well, we'll have to look at that in a minute, but it's going to require a leadership and mindset. This is the societal challenge. We're going to have to accept different if we're going to move into this better space. Shifting our expectations, as the paper says from Patrick Webb and others, what we're currently getting, which is suboptimal, to what we want to get, which is better. How do we define better? First of all, is to agree what outcomes are acceptable. What do we want as society? From whose perspective? Who has to think about that? And then we need to adapt our activities in order to deliver more balanced outcomes. And very simply, the degree of transformation will determine the effort that has to go into the adaptation. And it's not just in the farming, and it's not just in the processing, it's not just in the consuming, it's across the whole piece. The system view needs negotiation. That's because there are going to be people who don't want it to change. They're very thank you. They like the status quo, but we need to have the complexity navigated. So just to conclude, who has to do what to adapt, and who has to do what to transform our outcomes? We're looking to transform the outcomes, which means we need to adapt our activities. We've got a range of activities on the chart. They are all open for doing differently. How do we get the people doing them to change their behaviour? Well, we respond to a signal, and the signal can be an opportunity, a new business proposition, or the threat, a health message, or something like that. So, question, how do we manage the signals? And the signals are a combination of the policy messages from the private sector, from the public sector, in the context in which those policies are being set. And the challenge we have here is that the effect of transforming the outcomes automatically changes the context, because it is a dynamic system. That is the point. So in order to manage this, we need to think about how we reassess the policies in the public and private sector all the time in the context of what's coming down the track, as opposed to what has been in the past. And this is where we can use scenarios. Use scenarios for an exploratory purpose or as a normative purpose. So, just to conclude, why is it so hard to make progress? Well, we've got a complex adaptive system. We all know about that. Lots of drivers and feedback, lots of vested interest and lock-ins, wide range of power and fragmented governance. But on the positive side, there are many, many opportunities for interventions. Technical options, excellent. You know so many of them in this room. But there are policy, there are social options, many options for cooperation, many for the futures. And that really means there are many opportunities for food system navigators who can help interpret that complexity and work within. So 3 messages to conclude. Promote a systems approach in our thinking. Many people are interested in that. You are obviously here to help. Think for a better balance across the food system outcomes, not just aiming at one particular outcome. We have to get that balance. And finally, aim to manage, not just meet food demand. For those who don't have enough, we need to meet their demand. For those of us who have too much, we need to manage our demand. That really is where we're at.